Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stirred the massive pot of stew. The steam rose around his face, carrying the rich aroma of vegetables and synthetic protein that had become his daily ritual. Outside the reinforced windows of the refugee camp kitchen, the red sun of Kepler 442b cast everything in an orange glow that still felt alien after 3 years of exile. The camp stretched endlessly beyond the cooking facility. Thousands of makeshift shelters housed the remnants of humanity's failed colony on New Geneva. When the Zephyrian Empire had swept through their sector, most humans had fled deeper into unknown space. Marcus and 2,000 others had been stranded here when their transport ships suffered critical engine failures. Another day, another meal for the hungry, Marcus muttered to himself, a habit he'd developed during the long, solitary hours of preparation. The camp's food synthesizers had broken down months ago, leaving only basic ingredients and his determination to keep everyone fed. A soft scratching at the kitchen's back door interrupted his thoughts. Marcus smiled despite his exhaustion. Right on schedule. He walked over and opened the heavy metal door, revealing 4 small figures huddled in the shadows of the alley between buildings. They were unlike anything in the human database of known species. Each stood about 3 feet tall, with elongated limbs that seemed too delicate for their bodies. Their skin had a translucent quality, showing faint patterns of bioluminescence beneath the surface. Large, dark eyes dominated their faces, and they moved with a peculiar grace that reminded Marcus of dancers. "There you are," Marcus said softly, crouching down to their level. The children, for that's what he assumed they were, based on their size and behavior, had been coming to his kitchen for weeks. They never spoke, at least not in any way he could understand. Sometimes they made soft clicking sounds to each other, but mostly they communicated through gestures and those expressive eyes. The smallest one, whom Marcus had privately named Luna because of the silver patterns on her skin, stepped forward first. She held out a small container made from some kind of organic material that looked like hardened tree bark. Marcus took it gently, noting how light it was, and filled it with the warm stew. "Careful now, it's hot," he warned, though he knew they couldn't understand his words. Over the weeks, he'd learned to blow on the food first. Showing them it was too warm, they'd picked up on this quickly, copying his actions with an intelligence that impressed him. The other 3, Storm, Whisper, and Bright, as he'd named them based on their skin patterns, each presented their containers in turn. Marcus filled each one carefully, making sure to include plenty of the nutrient-rich vegetables he'd managed to grow in the camp's hydroponic gardens. He'd noticed that the children seemed to thrive on plant-based foods, though they showed no adverse reaction to the synthetic proteins. As he handed back the last container to Bright, whose skin sparkled with golden flecks, Marcus noticed something different about the children today. They seemed more alert, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing more rapidly than usual. Luna made a series of soft clicking sounds and gestured toward the sky. Marcus followed her gaze and saw what had caught their attention. High above the camp, almost invisible against the alien stars, several dark shapes moved across the heavens. Ships, by the look of them, though too distant to identify their origin or purpose. "Probably just traders," Marcus said, though something in the children's reaction made him uneasy. They had never shown interest in the occasional vessels that passed through the system. Their clicking became more urgent, and Whisper tugged at the hem of Marcus's worn cook's apron. Storm, the tallest of the group, made a gesture that Marcus had learned meant danger or bad. The children had taught him this when warning him about the camp's broken water recycler that had been leaking toxic coolant. "You think those ships are trouble?" Marcus asked. The children's patterns flashed in what he'd come to recognize as agreement. Luna pointed toward the camp's main buildings, then made the gesture for hide. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. If these children, who seemed to possess an uncanny ability to sense danger, were warning him about the approaching ships, he needed to take their concerns seriously. "Okay, I understand," he said, setting down his ladle. "You 4 need to get somewhere safe. Go to your hiding place." He made shooing motions with his hands, but the children hesitated. Luna reached up and touched his arm, her large eyes filled with what looked like concern. The gesture was so human, so filled with genuine care, that Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. These strange, beautiful children had somehow become the brightest part of his difficult existence on this hostile world. Their daily visits gave him purpose beyond just surviving another day. "I'll be careful, I promise," he assured them. "But you need to go now." This time, the children understood the urgency in his voice. They gathered their containers and disappeared into the maze of refugee shelters with their characteristic silent grace. Marcus secured the kitchen and hurried toward the camp's communications center. The evening shift officer, Sarah Martinez, looked up from her monitoring station as he burst through the door. "Sarah, we've got incoming ships," Marcus said breathlessly. "Unknown origin, and I think they might be hostile." Sarah frowned and checked her instruments. "I'm not showing anything on long-range sensors." "Are you sure? Check again." "High orbit, coming from the night side." Marcus pointed toward the coordinates where he'd seen the ships. After a few moments of adjustment, Sarah's expression changed. "Holy hell, you're right! How did you spot them? Our sensors should have picked them up first." The ships were still too distant for detailed scans, but their approach vector and stealth capabilities suggested military vessels. "Lucky guess," Marcus said, not wanting to explain about his alien friends. Most of the camp's residents knew he fed something behind the kitchen, but they assumed it was just local wildlife. He'd never corrected that assumption, sensing that the children's safety might depend on anonymity. Sarah activated the camp-wide emergency communication system. "All residents. This is Control. We have unidentified vessels approaching our position. Please proceed to designated shelter areas and await further instructions." The camp erupted into controlled chaos as people gathered essential belongings and moved to the reinforced shelters that had been constructed for exactly this type of situation. Marcus found himself assigned to Emergency Shelter 3, a converted cargo bay that could house about 200 people. As he settled onto a hard bench between an elderly engineer and a young family with twin babies, Marcus couldn't shake his worry about the 4 children. Where did they go during emergencies? Did they have shelter adequate to protect them from whatever was coming? The waiting was the worst part. Hours passed with only occasional updates from the communication center. The ships had entered the system but remained at the edge of scanner range, as if studying the planet and its inhabitants. Some of the refugees whispered about invasion, others about pirates looking for slaves or resources. Marcus tried to sleep but found himself staring at the shelter's reinforced ceiling, thinking about Luna's concerned touch and the way all 4 children had tried to warn him of danger. Their intelligence and emotional capacity challenged everything he thought he knew about non-human species. Most of the galaxy's known races were either primitive or so advanced that they showed little interest in individual relationships with humans. A soft vibration through the shelter's floor announced the landing of the mysterious ships. Sarah's voice crackled over the intercom system. Tense, but controlled. "All residents remain in shelters. We have confirmed landing of 6 vessels near the camp perimeter. They appear to be military in design but from an unknown configuration. No communication attempts have been successful." Through the shelter's small observation windows, Marcus could see strange lights moving in the darkness beyond the camp's boundaries. The lights had an organic quality, pulsing and shifting in patterns that seemed almost alive. They reminded him of something, but he couldn't quite place what. Then it hit him. The lights pulsed in the same rhythms as the children's bioluminescent patterns. The realization sent a shock through his system. Could there be a connection between his 4 small friends and these mysterious visitors? The thought seemed impossible. Yet the timing was too coincidental to ignore. The children had sensed the ship's approach before the camp's advanced sensors detected them. They had known to warn him, to seek safety, and now vessels bearing similar light patterns had landed outside their refuge. Marcus stood up abruptly, earning concerned looks from his sheltermates. "I need to check on something," he announced, moving toward the shelter's entrance. "Are you crazy?" The elderly engineer grabbed his arm. Sarah specifically said to stay inside. "There's something I have to verify," Marcus replied, gently but firmly removing the man's grip. "I'll be careful, but this might be important for all of us." Before anyone could stop him, Marcus activated the shelter's emergency release and stepped into the night air. The camp's emergency lighting cast everything in harsh shadows, and the alien sounds from beyond the perimeter sent chills down his spine. He made his way carefully toward the kitchen, using his intimate knowledge of the camp's layout to avoid the main pathways. If he was right about the connection, the children might return to their usual meeting place, drawn by familiarity or seeking his help. As he rounded the corner behind the kitchen building, Marcus stopped dead in his tracks. The 4 children stood in their usual spot, but they were not alone. 3 tall figures surrounded them, and even in the dim light, Marcus could see the family resemblance. The adults were clearly the same species as the children, but fully grown, they stood nearly 7 feet tall. Their bioluminescent patterns were more complex and vibrant, covering their bodies in intricate designs that pulsed with authority and power. They wore what appeared to be form-fitting armor that enhanced rather than concealed their natural light patterns. One of the adults, whose patterns blazed with particular intensity, noticed Marcus first. She turned toward him with fluid grace, and he found himself staring into eyes that held the same gentle intelligence as Luna's, but magnified by obvious age and experience. The children immediately began their clicking communication, faster and more complex than Marcus had ever heard. Luna broke away from the group and ran to him, grabbing his hand and pulling him forward with excited urgency. The tall female's patterns shifted to softer hues as Luna chattered away in their musical language. Marcus caught some familiar gestures. The signs for food, safety, and kindness that the children had taught him over the weeks. When Luna finished her explanation, the adult female stepped closer to Marcus. Her patterns pulsed once, slowly, and she made a gesture that somehow conveyed profound gratitude and respect. Then she did something that shocked him to his core. She spoke in perfect, unaccented English. "Human Marcus," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in his bones. "My children have told me of your daily kindness. You have fed them, protected them, and shown them the warmth of your species' compassion. I am Lirelei, their mother, and I owe you a debt that spans galaxies." Marcus's world tilted on its axis. These children, whom he had been feeding scraps behind a refugee camp kitchen, belonged to beings who possessed interstellar travel capabilities and spoke his language fluently. The implications crashed over him like a wave. "You're their mother," he repeated numbly. "But they come here every day, alone. I thought they were orphans, or lost, or..." Lirelei's patterns softened further, and something like sadness flickered in her eyes. "They are not lost, Marcus Chen. They are exploring, learning about the galaxy and its peoples as part of their education. When we received reports of human refugees stranded on this world, I brought my family to observe and assess your species' character." She gestured toward her children, who had gathered around Marcus with obvious affection. "What we discovered exceeded all expectations. Despite facing your own hardships, despite having limited resources, despite not knowing who or what my children were, you showed them consistent kindness and care. You fed them from your own supplies. You worried about their safety. You treated them as individuals worthy of respect and affection." Marcus looked down at the 4 small faces gazing up at him with those luminous eyes. "They're just children," he said simply. "Anyone would have done the same." Lirelei's laughter sounded like distant chimes. "Oh, Marcus Chen, how wonderfully wrong you are. In our journey across the galaxy, we have encountered hundreds of species. Many are kind to their own kind, some are neutral toward strangers, and others are actively hostile to any differences. But you fed alien children for weeks, expecting nothing in return, knowing nothing about them except that they were young and hungry." The weight of her words began to sink in. "You've been testing us," Marcus realized. "Your children weren't lost or abandoned. They were..." "What? Conducting some kind of social experiment?" "Not an experiment," Lirelei corrected gently. "An evaluation. The Zephyrian Empire has been expanding aggressively through this sector of space. They conquer worlds by claiming that the native species are inferior, unworthy of autonomy or protection. They have requested that the Galactic Assembly grant them authority over all primitive races in this region." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. "Including humans," she confirmed. However, the assembly requires evidence of a species' character before making such determinations. We have been tasked with evaluating humanity's worthiness of protection and potential membership in the greater galactic community. The magnitude of the situation hit Marcus like a physical blow. The way I treated your children. That was humanity's test. Liralei's patterns blazed brighter. One of many tests, conducted across multiple human settlements throughout this sector. But Marcus Chen, your actions, and the actions of others like you, have painted a picture of a species that shows remarkable compassion and moral courage, even in the face of adversity. Luna tugged on Marcus's sleeve and held up her container, now empty but still warm from the evening's meal. She made the gesture for, "Thank you." And then something new. A complex movement that somehow conveyed love and gratitude beyond simple words. "She wants you to know," Lirelei translated, "that your food was not just nourishment for their bodies, but proof that kindness exists in the universe. She will carry the memory of your generosity for the rest of her very long life." Marcus knelt down and gently touched Luna's shoulder, the way he had seen the children comfort each other. "Tell her that feeding them has been the best part of my day. Every day. They've given me more than I've given them." As Lirelei translated, all 4 children pressed close to Marcus, their patterns pulsing in perfect synchronization. The moment felt sacred, a bridge between species that transcended language and understanding. "Marcus Chen," Lirelei said formally, "I am Lirelei of the Etherian Dominion, first speaker of the Galactic Assembly's Evaluation Council. By the authority vested in me by the combined civilizations of this galaxy, I hereby declare humanity worthy of protection from the Zephyrian Empire and eligible for consideration as members of the Galactic Assembly." She paused, her patterns shifting to more complex configurations. "Moreover, I personally extend an invitation for you and your people to relocate to protected worlds within our territory, where you can rebuild your civilization under the Assembly's protection." The kitchen door behind them suddenly burst open, and Sarah Martinez stumbled out, followed by several other camp residents who had apparently decided to investigate the strange lights and sounds. "Marcus, what the hell are you?" Sarah stopped mid-sentence as she took in the scene. Marcus, kneeling among 4 small alien children while 3 imposing adult figures stood nearby, all of them glowing like living constellation maps. "Sarah," Marcus said calmly, rising to his feet, "I'd like you to meet Lirelei. It turns out she commands one of the most powerful fleets in the galaxy, and I've been feeding her children soup for the past 6 weeks." The emergency shelter had been converted into an impromptu meeting hall, its harsh lighting softened by the gentle bioluminescence of Lirelei's honor guard. 6 Etherian warriors stood at attention around the perimeter, their patterns pulsing in slow, measured rhythms that Marcus had learned indicated respectful vigilance. Sarah Martinez sat across from Lirelei at a hastily assembled table made from supply crates, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to process the magnitude of their situation. The camp's senior staff flanked her. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, their chief medical officer, Commander James Morrison, retired military and their security chief, and Maria Santos, their engineering coordinator. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Sarah said, her voice carefully controlled. "You represent a galactic government that we never knew existed, and you've been secretly evaluating our species to determine whether we deserve protection from an aggressive empire that we also never knew existed." Lirelei's patterns shifted to what Marcus now recognized as diplomatic formality. "Your understanding is accurate, though simplified. The Galactic Assembly consists of 47 member species and protects over 200 developing civilizations. We have been monitoring human expansion into this sector for approximately 50 Earth Standard years." Dr. Harper leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic caution. "Monitoring how? We've never detected any alien presence near human colonies. Your technology, while impressive for a young species, operates within a limited spectrum of detection," Lirelei explained patiently. "Our observation posts exist in dimensional phases that your instruments cannot perceive. We have been studying your biology, your social structures, your conflicts, and your capacity for growth." Commander Morrison's military training made him focus on tactical concerns. This Zephyrian Empire you mentioned. How immediate is the threat? Should we be preparing for invasion? The question caused Liralee's patterns to darken ominously. The threat is more immediate than you realize. The Zephyrian fleet is already en route to this system. They believe they are coming to claim an undefended world inhabited by primitive refugees. They expect no resistance. How long do we have? Morrison asked. Perhaps 10 of your days, Liralee replied. However, they will discover my fleet's presence long before they reach the planet. The situation will escalate quickly from that point. Marcus, who had remained quietly observant during the formal discussions, finally spoke up. You said humanity passed your evaluation. What does that actually mean for us? Note, Liralee turned toward him, her patterns brightening noticeably. Luna and her siblings had been allowed to remain in the shelter, and they immediately moved closer to Marcus when their mother addressed him. Your species has demonstrated 3 qualities that the Assembly values above all others, Liralee began. First, you show consistent kindness to those who cannot benefit you in return. Marcus's care for my children exemplifies this trait. But our observers have documented similar behavior throughout human settlements. She gestured to a small device that projected 3-dimensional images into the air between them. The scenes showed humans helping injured aliens, sharing resources with stranded travelers, and defending weaker species from aggressors. Second, you display remarkable adaptability and resilience. When faced with exile and limited resources, your people did not despair or turn against each other. Instead, you organized, you innovated, and you thrived. Your camp's survival and growth, under adverse conditions, impressed our evaluators. The projector showed images of the refugee camp's development over the past 3 years, the hydroponic gardens, the workshop facilities, the school that had been built for the camp's children, and the hospital where Dr. Harper had saved hundreds of lives with limited equipment. Third, and most significantly, you possess what we term moral courage. You make ethical choices, even when those choices are difficult or costly. You protect the weak, you seek justice for the wronged, and you sacrifice for the greater good. The final set of images showed human peacekeepers intervening in conflicts between alien species, human scientists sharing medical knowledge freely, and human rescue teams responding to disasters on non-human worlds. Dr. Harper studied the images with growing amazement. You've been documenting humanity for 50 years, but these recent images, how did you get footage from human colonies that are light years away? The Assembly operates a communication network that transcends traditional space-time limitations, Liralee explained. Information travels instantaneously between observation posts throughout the galaxy. Every act of human kindness, every demonstration of your species' character, has been recorded and evaluated. Maria Santos, ever practical, asked the question that had been nagging at Marcus. If you've been watching us for so long, why reveal yourselves now? Why not wait until after this Zephyrian threat is resolved? Liralee's patterns took on a complex configuration that conveyed both urgency and regret. Because the Zephyrian Empire has forced our hand, they have petitioned the Assembly to grant them stewardship over all primitive species in this sector, claiming that young civilizations cannot survive without guidance from their betters. Commander Morrison's expression darkened. And by stewardship, you mean slavery? Essentially, yes. The Zephyrians view younger species as resources to be exploited. They would relocate your populations to serve as laborers on their industrial worlds, separate families to prevent organization, and gradually breed your independence out of existence. The shelter fell silent as the implications sank in. Sarah's voice was barely a whisper when she spoke. How many human settlements are at risk? All of them in this sector, Liralee confirmed. Approximately 40 colonies with a combined population of 12 million humans. The Zephyrian petition will be heard by the Assembly Council in 30 standard days. If we cannot provide compelling evidence of humanity's worthiness for protection, they will be granted authority over your species. Marcus felt a surge of protective anger that surprised him with its intensity. These were his people, his species, facing extinction or enslavement because of political machinations they had never even known existed. What kind of evidence would convince the Assembly Council? He asked. Liralay's patterns shifted to something that might have been hope. Demonstration of humanity's capacity to contribute to galactic civilization. Evidence that your species possesses unique qualities that would benefit the greater community of worlds. Dr. Harper straightened in her chair. We have medical knowledge, technological innovations, cultural contributions, all of which we have documented. Liralay agreed. But the Zephyrians argue that any useful human knowledge can be extracted and applied by more advanced species. They claim that humans themselves are unnecessary. The casual cruelty of that assessment hit Marcus like a physical blow. Storm, the tallest of the children, seemed to sense his distress and moved closer. Placing a small, warm hand on his arm, the gesture of comfort from a child whose mother commanded galactic fleets struck him as profoundly symbolic. There has to be something, Marcus insisted. Some way to prove our worth that can't be duplicated or dismissed. Liralay's patterns brightened significantly, and Marcus realized she had been leading them toward this moment. There is. The Assembly has agreed to allow humanity to demonstrate their worthiness through direct action. A crisis has emerged in the Centauri sector that requires immediate intervention. If a human delegation can successfully resolve this crisis, it would provide undeniable proof of your species' value. Commander Morrison's military instincts activated. What kind of crisis? A plague outbreak on 3 worlds inhabited by the Vectar people. The disease is highly contagious and has a 90% mortality rate. Traditional medical approaches have failed, and the affected worlds face complete population collapse within months. Dr. Harper's eyes lit up with professional interest and horror. 90% mortality? That's approaching extinction-level pandemic. What are the symptoms? How does it spread? What treatments have been attempted? The plague attacks the neurological system, causing progressive paralysis and eventual respiratory failure. It spreads through atmospheric contact, making quarantine nearly impossible. The Vectar's own medical experts have exhausted their knowledge, and other assembly species have been unable to develop effective treatments. Why do you think humans might succeed where others have failed? Sarah asked. Liralay's patterns took on an almost mischievous quality. Because humans possess a unique combination of traits that other species lack. Your adaptability allows you to approach problems from unexpected angles. Your empathy drives you to persist when others might abandon difficult cases. And your stubborn refusal to accept defeat has led to medical breakthroughs that more logical species considered impossible. She paused, her gaze moving between the camp's leaders. Moreover, preliminary analysis suggests that human physiology might provide natural immunity to this particular plague. If true, human medical teams could work directly with infected populations without protective equipment, allowing for more intimate study and treatment development. Marcus felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. The conversation had moved far beyond his simple desire to help hungry children. But the core principle remained the same. People were suffering, and he had the opportunity to help. How many humans would you need for this mission? He asked. Liralay's attention focused on him with laser intensity. The mission would require a small, specialized team, perhaps 12 individuals with diverse expertise, medical personnel, engineers, social coordinators, and others who can work effectively under extreme pressure. Dr. Harper was already making mental calculations. I'd need at least 3 other medical specialists, preferably with experience in infectious diseases and emergency medicine, plus laboratory technicians who can work with alien physiology. Maria Santos nodded thoughtfully. Engineering support would be crucial for setting up treatment facilities and maintaining life support systems in potentially hostile environments. Commander Morrison's expression was grim but determined. Security personnel who can protect the team while they work, and someone with diplomatic skills to coordinate with local authorities. Sarah looked around the table at her colleagues, then at Liralay. You're asking us to volunteer for what could be a suicide mission, to travel to alien worlds, face a deadly plague, and somehow achieve what advanced galactic civilizations could not. Yes, Liralay confirmed simply. And if we fail? Then the Vectar die, and humanity faces enslavement under the Zephyrian Empire. And if we succeed, then humanity earns protection, membership in the Galactic Assembly, and access to technologies and knowledge that will advance your civilization by millennia. Marcus looked down at Luna, who had been following the conversation with intelligent eyes, despite the language barrier. She seemed to sense the gravity of the moment and made a gesture he hadn't seen before. Both hands pressed to her chest, then extended toward him. Somehow, he understood it meant, "I believe in you. I'll go," he said quietly. Every head in the shelter turned toward him. Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "Marcus, you're a cook, not a doctor or diplomat." "I'm someone who doesn't give up on hungry children," Marcus replied. "And from what Lirelei has described, that's exactly what this mission needs. People who won't give up on others, no matter how impossible the situation seems." Lirelei's patterns blazed with approval. Marcus Chen speaks wisdom. Technical expertise can be taught, equipment can be provided. But the determination to persist in the face of suffering, that comes from the heart. It cannot be programmed or manufactured. Dr. Harper studied Marcus with new respect. "Actually, Sarah, his point is valid. Medical missions aren't just about clinical knowledge. They're about maintaining morale, connecting with patients, and finding creative solutions when standard procedures fail." Marcus has been successfully managing nutrition for 2,000 people with limited resources for 3 years. Those are exactly the kind of problem-solving skills we'd need. One by one, the camp's leaders began to volunteer. Dr. Harper committed immediately, citing her oath to help wherever healing was needed. Maria Santos volunteered her engineering expertise. Commander Morrison offered his tactical knowledge and protective capabilities. Sarah remained hesitant until Luna approached her chair and offered a small, carved token that seemed to be made from the same organic material as their food containers. The gesture of trust from the alien child seemed to tip the balance in her mind. "If we do this," Sarah said slowly, "if we take on this mission, what happens to the rest of the camp? To the other human settlements that might be under threat? My fleet will remain to protect this system while you attempt the mission," Lirelei promised. "Other assembly vessels are being positioned near human colonies throughout the sector. We will buy you the time you need. But ultimately, success or failure rests with your team." Marcus felt the familiar sensation of responsibility settling over him, magnified 1,000-fold from his simple daily routine of feeding hungry children. But the core emotion remained the same: the absolute certainty that helping others was worth any risk to himself. "When do we leave?" he asked. Lirelei's patterns shifted to configurations of respect and admiration. "Tomorrow, if you are willing. The Vectar cannot afford delay, and neither can humanity." As the meeting broke up and people began discussing practical preparations, Marcus found himself alone with the 4 children. They gathered around him as they had so many times behind the kitchen. But now he understood the significance of those simple moments. Luna held up her empty container one more time and made the gesture for "thank you." But then she did something new. She pointed to the container, then to Marcus, then to the stars visible through the shelter's windows. Somehow, her meaning was perfectly clear. She was telling him that his kindness had reached across the galaxy, and now it was time to share it with others who needed it just as desperately as 4 hungry children had needed a warm meal and a caring smile. Marcus knelt down and gathered all 4 children into a gentle embrace, their bioluminescent patterns pulsing in harmony with his steady heartbeat. Tomorrow, he would leave this place to face unknown dangers on alien worlds. But tonight, he was exactly where he belonged, surrounded by the beings who had taught him that compassion knows no boundaries, and that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the fate of entire civilizations. The Vectar homeworld of Thessarian Prime looked like a graveyard from orbit. Once bright cities lay dark and silent beneath thick atmospheric haze, their population centers eerily empty of the aerial traffic that should have filled the skies. Marcus pressed his face to the transport's viewport, trying to comprehend the scale of devastation below. Preliminary scans confirmed the plague's progression, Dr. Harper reported from her monitoring station. Population density in major urban areas has dropped by 87%. We're seeing massive migrations toward rural regions, probably families fleeing to isolated communities in hopes of avoiding infection. The human medical team had grown to 15 specialists during their 3-day journey aboard Liralay's flagship, the Eternal Dawn. Volunteers from other refugee camps had joined them, bringing expertise in infectious disease control, biochemical engineering, and xenobiology. Marcus felt humbled to be among such accomplished individuals, but Liralay had insisted his presence was essential. The Vectar are a proud people, she had explained during their journey. They have accepted our offer of human assistance reluctantly, viewing it as admission of failure. They will be more receptive to someone who approaches them as an equal rather than a superior. Now, as their shuttle descended through Thessarian's atmosphere, Marcus understood what she meant. The Vectar were magnificent beings, tall and graceful, with iridescent feathers that caught light like living prisms and intelligent eyes that spoke of ancient wisdom. But the representatives who met them at the landing facility moved with the defeated posture of people who had watched their world die around them. Chancellor Vex Thara, leader of the Planetary Council, stood at the center of the welcoming delegation. Her feathers, which should have blazed with authority and health, were dull and listless. Dark circles around her eyes spoke of sleepless nights spent making impossible decisions. "Humans," she said, her translator rendering her musical voice into flat English. "We welcome your assistance, though we hold little hope for success. Our finest medical minds have labored for months without progress. The plague of silences spreads faster than we can contain it." Marcus stepped forward, noting how the other Vectar instinctively moved away from their chancellor. Even here, among the leadership, fear of contagion ruled every interaction. "Chancellor Vex Thara," he said, offering a respectful bow that he'd learned from Liralay's cultural briefings. "We're honored that you've allowed us to help. We don't pretend to have easy answers, but we bring fresh perspectives and different approaches. Sometimes an outside view can reveal solutions that are hidden by familiarity." Something flickered in the Chancellor's eyes, perhaps surprise at being addressed as an equal rather than a desperate supplicant. "You speak with wisdom, human. Come, we will show you the extent of our crisis." The tour of Thessarian's medical facilities was sobering beyond Marcus's worst imagination. Entire hospital wings stood empty, because treating plague victims required such extensive protective equipment that staff became exhausted within hours. Patients lay in isolation chambers, their families unable to offer comfort during their final days. The youngest victims were the hardest to witness. Vectar children, whose bright plumage had faded to gray, their musical voices reduced to weak whispers. Dr. Harper and her team immediately began analyzing patient samples and reviewing treatment records. The Vectar physicians, despite their exhaustion and despair, proved eager to share their knowledge and collaborate with the human specialists. Marcus found himself drawn to the pediatric ward, where young Vectar patients reminded him of Luna and her siblings. The parallel wasn't lost on him. Once again, he was faced with vulnerable children who needed care and protection. But these children were dying, and he felt helpless in ways he never had while ladling soup behind a refugee camp kitchen. "Their neural pathways are degrading in a cascade pattern," Dr. Sarah Kim, their neurological specialist, explained as she showed Marcus the brain scans. "It starts with motor function loss, progresses to speech centers, and finally shuts down autonomic responses. We've never seen anything like it in human or known alien pathologies." "What about treatment approaches?" Marcus asked, studying the ghostly images of deteriorating neural tissue. "The Vectar have tried everything. Antiviral compounds, neural stimulation therapy, even experimental genetic modification. Nothing slows the progression. The disease appears to actively adapt to counter any intervention." Marcus spent that evening in the children's ward, simply sitting with the young patients. He couldn't offer medical expertise, but he could provide the same thing he'd given to Liralay's children: presence, attention, and the assurance that someone cared about their well-being. One particular patient, a young female named Kirathi, seemed especially drawn to his company. Her feathers had faded from brilliant emerald to pale gray, and her voice was barely audible, but her eyes remained bright with intelligence and curiosity. Through gesture and careful use of the universal translator, Marcus learned that Kirithy had been an artist before the plague, creating beautiful sculptures from living crystal formations. She showed him images of her work on a small viewing device, intricate structures that seemed to capture the essence of music and light in solid form. Beautiful, Marcus told her honestly, studying the holographic displays. You have an amazing gift for seeing patterns and connections. Kirithy made a soft sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. Then she did something unexpected. She took Marcus's hand and guided it to trace patterns in the air, mimicking the flowing lines of her sculptures. As Marcus moved his finger through the three-dimensional space, following her guidance, something clicked in his mind. The patterns she was showing him weren't random. They followed mathematical principles, geometric relationships that seemed to mirror biological structures. "Dr. Harper," Marcus called excitedly, his voice carrying across the ward. "I need you to see this." When the medical team gathered around Kirithy's bedside, the young Vectar repeated her demonstration. She guided each human through the pattern tracing exercise, her weak voice humming a barely audible melody that seemed to correspond to the geometric shapes. "She's showing us neural pathway structures, Doctor," Kim realized with growing excitement. "These patterns match the healthy brain configurations we saw in the early scans. She's demonstrating how the connections should flow." Dr. Harper was already connecting her medical scanner to the room's display system. "If we could map these patterns precisely, we might be able to develop a neural restoration therapy. Instead of fighting the plague directly, we could rebuild the pathways it destroys." The breakthrough came at 3 a.m. After 18 hours of intensive collaboration between human medical specialists and Vectar artists like Kirithy, the plague didn't just destroy neural pathways randomly. It followed predictable patterns that corresponded to disruptions in the Vectar's natural biorhythmic frequencies. "It's not really a disease in the traditional sense, Doctor," Harper explained to the assembled medical teams. "It's more like a interference pattern that disrupts the harmonic frequencies essential to Vectar neural function. Their brains operate on musical principles. Literally, their thoughts flow in harmonic patterns that the plague throws out of tune." Chancellor Vexthara listened to the explanation with growing amazement. "You discovered this by observing our art forms?" Our own medical experts focused entirely on biological factors. "Sometimes solutions come from unexpected directions," Marcus replied, thinking of how Luna's simple gesture of trust had led to humanity's first contact with a galactic civilization. "Your artists understood something about neural function that traditional medicine couldn't see." The treatment protocol that emerged combined human medical technology with Vectar artistic understanding. Patients underwent sonic therapy sessions where specially composed music helped retune their neural frequencies, while human-developed nanobotic systems rebuilt damaged pathways. Kirithy was among the first to receive the experimental treatment. Marcus held her hand as the therapeutic harmonics filled her isolation chamber, watching her faded feathers gradually regain their vibrant emerald color. When she spoke his name clearly for the first time, her voice carrying the musical tones natural to healthy Vectar, Marcus felt the same profound satisfaction he'd experienced feeding hungry children. The treatment's success rate exceeded everyone's wildest expectations. Within 2 weeks, 95% of patients showed significant improvement. The plague's spread not only stopped but reversed as recovered individuals developed natural immunity that they could share with others through harmonic resonance. As the crisis resolved, Marcus found himself in an unexpected position. The Vectar Council formally requested that he remain on Thessarian Prime as a permanent cultural liaison, recognizing that his intuitive understanding of interspecies cooperation had been crucial to the medical breakthrough. "Your presence here opened minds to possibilities that pure technical knowledge could not achieve," Chancellor Vexthara told him during the formal ceremony marking the plague's defeat. "You saw connections where others saw only differences." But Marcus's thoughts were with Luna and her siblings, with the refugee camp on Kepler 442b, and with the millions of humans still facing the Zephyrian threat. "I'm honored by your offer, Chancellor, but my responsibility is to my own people first." When the human team returned to Liralay's flagship, They found the Etherian commander surrounded by holographic displays showing tactical formations and star charts. Her patterns pulsed with anticipation and something that might have been pride. "The Galactic Assembly Council has reviewed the reports from Thessarian Prime," she announced as the medical team gathered in the flagship's main briefing chamber. "Your success there has exceeded all expectations and provided compelling evidence of humanity's value to galactic civilization." Dr. Harper leaned forward eagerly. "What was their decision?" "Humanity has been granted full protection status under Assembly law. The Zephyrian petition has been denied, and their fleet has been ordered to withdraw from human space immediately. Moreover, your species has been invited to begin the process of joining the Assembly as full members." The briefing chamber erupted in cheers and celebration, but Marcus felt a nagging concern. What about the Zephyrians? Will they accept the Assembly's decision? Liralay's patterns darkened ominously. Initial reports suggest they will not comply peacefully. Their fleet continues advancing toward the human settlements, and their commanders have declared the Assembly's decision invalid. They claim that humans used unnatural methods to solve the Thessarian crisis, and that the results don't reflect true capability. "Unnatural methods?" Maria Santos asked indignantly. "We combined medical science with artistic insight. How is that unnatural?" "Because it required cooperation between species, and the Zephyrians believe that superior races should not need assistance from inferiors," Liralay explained. "They see your collaboration with the Vectar as evidence of weakness rather than strength." Commander Morrison's military training kicked in. "So we're looking at armed conflict. Possibly. The Assembly is preparing a fleet to enforce their decision. But the situation remains volatile. The Zephyrians possess advanced weapons technology and have shown willingness to use overwhelming force against civilian populations." Marcus thought about the refugee camp, about thousands of families who had already lost everything once, and now faced the possibility of enslavement, or worse. Then he thought about Luna's gesture of trust, about Kirithi's artistic vision that had saved her entire species, about the power of connection and understanding to overcome seemingly impossible challenges. "There might be another way," he said quietly. Every head in the briefing chamber turned toward him. Liralay's patterns shifted to attentive interest. "Explain." "The Zephyrians think strength comes from domination, from proving superiority through force. What if we could demonstrate that real strength comes from cooperation, not just tell them, but show them in a way they couldn't dismiss or ignore?" "How?" Dr. Harper asked. Marcus looked around the room at the team that had just saved an entire species through collaborative effort. "The same way we solved the Thessarian plague, by working together, combining our different strengths, and refusing to accept that any problem is truly unsolvable." Liralay's patterns blazed with something that looked like hope. "You're suggesting a direct diplomatic approach? Meeting with the Zephyrian commanders?" "I'm suggesting we invite them to see what humanity actually represents," Marcus replied. "Not through combat or political declarations, but through demonstration. Show them the refugee camp. Show them what we've built together with limited resources. Let them meet people like Luna and her siblings, who trust in kindness despite having every reason to be suspicious of strangers." The idea was audacious to the point of seeming insane. Inviting a hostile alien fleet to visit defenseless human settlements went against every principle of military strategy. But as the team discussed the proposal, its logic became increasingly compelling. "We'd need guarantees of safe passage," Commander Morrison insisted, "and neutral observers from the Assembly to witness any interactions," Dr. Harper added, "and a backup plan in case diplomacy fails." Maria Santos concluded grimly. Liralay studied the star charts showing the approaching Zephyrian fleet. "It would be an enormous risk. If the gambit fails, the consequences for humanity could be catastrophic." Marcus thought about Luna's small hand on his arm, offering comfort when she sensed his distress. About Kirithi's trust in sharing her artistic vision with complete strangers. About the daily choice to feed hungry children even when resources were scarce and the future uncertain. "Everything worthwhile involves risk," he said simply. "But kindness has gotten us this far. Maybe it can take us the rest of the way." 3 days later, Marcus stood in the refugee camp's central plaza, watching the sky as 3 Zephyrian cruisers descended through Kepler 442b's atmosphere. Around him, 2,000 humans went about their daily routines, tending gardens, teaching children, maintaining equipment, preparing meals. None of them looked like the primitive, helpless beings that the Zephyrians expected to find. Luna and her siblings stood beside him, their patterns pulsing with excitement and nervous energy. Lirelei had positioned her fleet at the edge of the system, ready to intervene if necessary but committed to giving diplomacy every possible chance. The Zephyrian delegation emerged from their landing craft like figures from a nightmare. Tall, armored, carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Their leader, Admiral HFY, surveyed the camp with obvious disdain. "So these are the humans the Assembly seeks to protect," the Admiral said through his translator, his voice carrying the arrogance of absolute certainty. "They appear adequately maintained for a primitive species." Marcus stepped forward, noting how Luna moved protectively closer to his side. "Admiral HFY, welcome to our home. We're honored by your visit and hope you'll join us for our evening meal. There's always room at our table for travelers." The simple invitation seemed to catch the Admiral off guard. His translator struggled with the concept of offering hospitality to an enemy. "You seek to feed us? Why?" "Because you're far from home, and no one should go hungry when there's plenty to share," Marcus replied. "It's what we do." What followed was perhaps the most important meal in human history. The Admiral and his officers found themselves seated at long tables in the camp's dining hall, surrounded by families who treated them not as conquerors but as guests. Children brought them handmade drawings, elderly residents shared stories of their various homeworlds, and Luna herself offered the Admiral a carefully carved token of welcome. As the evening progressed, Admiral HFY's rigid certainty began to crack. He watched humans sharing scarce resources without expectation of return, saw former enemies working together on common projects, witnessed the kind of community that the Zephyrian Empire had forgotten how to build. "This is not what we were told to expect," the Admiral admitted quietly to Marcus as the meal concluded. "Our intelligence described humans as chaotic, selfish, and weak. We can be all of those things," Marcus agreed honestly. "But we can also be something more when we choose to be. Just like any species, I imagine." The Admiral studied Luna, who had fallen asleep against Marcus's shoulder during the after-dinner storytelling. Her bioluminescent patterns pulsed gently in the rhythm of peaceful dreams. "The Etherean child trusts you completely," he observed. "We're friends," Marcus said simply. "She and her siblings taught me that kindness speaks every language in the galaxy." Admiral HFY was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weariness that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. "My people have not known friendship in many generations. We understand only dominance and submission, strength and weakness. What you show me here, it is alien to everything we have built our society upon." "It doesn't have to be," Marcus replied gently. "Every species makes choices about what kind of civilization they want to create. You could choose differently. I Marcus 2C. End quote. I Marcus 2C. R. The next morning brought word that the Zephyrian fleet was withdrawing from human space. Admiral HFY's final message to the camp was brief but profound. "You have shown us something we had forgotten was possible. Perhaps it is not too late for my people to remember." 6 months later, Marcus received a message from the Zephyrian homeworld. Admiral HFY had been elected to their ruling council on a platform of diplomatic cooperation rather than military conquest. The Empire was beginning the process of applying for membership in the Galactic Assembly. Luna and her siblings still visited the camp's kitchen every evening, though now they came with their mother, and often brought friends from other species who wanted to meet the humans who had shown that compassion could change the galaxy. The small rituals of daily kindness continued, creating ripples that spread far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Marcus continued to cook, to serve, and to believe in the simple truth that had guided him from the beginning, that in a universe vast and often frightening, the choice to care for one another remained the most powerful force for change. Behind a refugee camp kitchen, feeding whoever was hungry, he had discovered that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their adaptability, but their refusal to let others suffer alone. And in the end, That refusal had not only saved humanity, but offered hope to an entire galaxy that kindness, once thought extinct, might bloom again among the stars.